Howdy, howdy. My name is Cody Glover. I'm a licensed professional counselor in both Texas and Oregon. And today I'd like to discuss how I think the body and mind affect us in relationships that, if we were aware of, might help us go through the relationships better. I am going to have kind of a special focus on ethically non monogamous relationships. In this presentation, there's a couple of warnings that I want to give. First, unfortunately, the research is kind of gendered towards white Anglo Saxon Protestant, primarily men. There's some of the research that has very gendered language. Whenever I use that language, I want to be very clear that it represents self identified cisgender assigned male or assigned female at birth individuals and may not capture the specific sexual orientations, gender identities, the expressions or dynamics that you yourself may be experiencing. I am open to any and all feedback about how to present this better. Secondly, I am going to briefly talk about trauma. And with discussions of trauma, there's sometimes discussions of self-harm or suicidality. So I want to offer those trigger warnings. If you have any thoughts or questions or ideas on how to improve this presentation, again, feel free to reach out. There's no ego in this for me. I am just here to serve the communities of which I often work with and am native to. So thank you, and I will start getting into this. My fun presentation name for this is Three Things That I Wish Ethically Non-Monogamous Communities Knew. These are the three primary topics that I most want to work through. The first is feelings and how the mind and body produces feelings, how we move through feelings and how they present in relationships. The same for limerence and how we go through and experience new relationship energy, both as the partner in it and the established partner and potentially the new partners, and how to work through some of those challenges. And finally, how trauma works in the body and mind and how it presents as a partner or as the person going through it or potential other stakeholders, and some further tips and tricks to deal with those. This is non-exhaustive, meaning that there are many aspects of the topics that are outside the scope and time of this project. This is meant to be kind of a quick, condensed triage of the three topics and hopefully some small ways to get us to begin the discussions on these topics in more informed, compassionate, empathetic ways with grace that support the growth of every stakeholder. Feelings, despite what some of us may or may not know, are not just magical things that land upon us based upon a certain situation. They are survival tools to help us survive the next 3 to 30 seconds, and in any given situation or after any given stimulus, begin acting in 40 milliseconds. While at the same time, your brain begins to recognize what the problem is at 500 milliseconds, which is still only half a second, but compared to 40 is almost a glacier's age away. Very often, we begin engaging in systems of feelings and emotion and reaction long before we figure out what we're reacting to. One of the reasons that social media is such a dumpster fire. I'm going to talk a bit about the body on this one, specifically the mind. I can do a cheap MRI for you if you want to find where your medial prefrontal cortex is, which, by the way, you don't have to memorize those words. They're just great Scrabble words. It is roughly here. When we take people that are gurus or monks that basically do a lot of meditation and mindfulness and we shove them into fMRI machines, that part of the brain lights up like a Christmas tree. That part of the brain is responsible for things like who am I, what is my place in society, what ethics are, tying current actions with future consequences. And it really helps us to engage with each other very roughly on how to be who I am, what I am, and a good person. When we are going through our day-to-day world, the body is trying to keep us alive in a very unpredictable and dangerous world. And very often it goes, well, this is something you've encountered before. Here's how you survived it last time. Let's get ready for that moment. And it's doing that on a repeat process all day long. Snickers says you're not yourself when you're hungry. I'd argue you're not even a self, but a survival beast. And you will do anything to survive when these emotions come on you. When people start showing up with brightly colored boxes and balloons and they light a candle and a cake, your body will start preparing you for the cake ritual. So that way you can strengthen social connections and imbibe some condensed calories that are easy to absorb. When you start going down a dark alley, your body starts thinking, oh, this reminds me of the dark time here and this unexpected social situation or this dangerous animal, and starts getting your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses prepared to engage what might be coming in that moment. Very often, people do not choose those reactions. However, if you begin engaging in mindfulness, that grows your medial prefrontal cortex, which is also the part of the brain most in connection with what we call the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. There is the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic, you jumped out of the plane, you have a parachute, you are resting and digesting, things are chill and cool. Challenges present. Now you're in the sympathetic nervous system. Our sympathy for you because when you jumped out of the plane, you didn't have a parachute. Now you're beginning to engage in one of those fight, flight, freeze, or fawn modes, and you may not even realize that it's coming upon you. The way that you get more vote piloting this brain body electric calorie mech suit that you're piloting all the time is to strengthen that medial prefrontal cortex. Again, when we take people who do a lot of meditation and a lot of mindfulness practices, that part has been greatly strengthened. If you would like more choice on your tools being, or excuse me, your emotions being good tools versus bad masters, really mindfulness is the reason therapists will not shut up about it. So, highly encourage this. Gratitude is the excellent practice of mindfulness. One of my favorite simple exercises to practice mindfulness, as well as to practice savoring and luxuriating in positive moments and building yourself up, is this particular one. I want you to imagine your favorite teacher somewhere between kindergarten and middle school. What were some of the specific things they told you or things that you remember them saying? How do they make you feel? For most people, how that person made them feel is much easier to recall than what specifically they might have said. I also like to point this out. I want you to think about your least favorite teacher from the same time span. How did they make you feel? Very often, people emphasize negatives over positives. It is much more important to remember that the spicy plant killed grog than that the sweet tasting plant grows near this tree because I can only make the grog mistake once. It takes 7 great visits to a restaurant to counteract one bad visit. There is such a strong internal formulation of risk versus reward and expected outcomes that Blizzard and World of Warcraft and casinos have been able to turn them into calculus equations to suck billions of dollars and billions of hours into keeping people engaged in behaviors that may not directly benefit them. You too are very often emphasizing negative experiences over positive experiences. Gratitude and mindfulness then becomes a very on purpose exercise that you have to choose and schedule practice of until it becomes routine. Limerence is the best and worst parts, I think, of relationships. It is that butterflies in the stomach. It is excitement and energy, new possibilities. I really like this person. We first began talking about it in a very major, interesting way with Dorothy Tinoff in the 1980s. And you can go to online forums today whenever they discuss limerence, what they most often talk about is I find myself obsessed with this person. I am a victim of this feeling. How do I process and deal with this? How do I either get with the person that I'm obsessed with, or how do I undo this obsession? I believe the missing part of the conversation is that limerence is a set of 14 different chemicals, hormones, pheromones, and such that is compromising and changing the way that you think and the way that you behave. The first phase, especially, is very interesting as it is the most disruptive. These 5 specific chemicals, I think, are the biggest culprits for the challenges that we see in ethical non monogamous communities. I'm going to talk about vasopressin first. This is the gendered language that I was warning about. As an example, women commonly go through a hormonal cycle of about 28 days. And as a society, we try to find a balance, hopefully, between how much is the individual responsible for dealing with the frustration, irritability, lack of sleep, and pain, and how that is expressed and projected to others. Essentially, as a society, we try to allow people that are going through these phases a little bit more grace, a little bit more empathy, because we realize that internally they're also struggling. By the way, just to let you know, men also have a hormonal cycle. It is 24 hours. They get grumpier through the day. Do with that information what you will. Back on topic though, vasopressin is a chemical or a hormone that is expressed by both men and women post coitus after the adult bounce house action times, also in the limerence phases. Specifically for men, this also encourages feelings and actions of territoriality and aggression. I think that there is a strong connection between the extra expression of vasopressin and one penis policies. Does this excuse their behaviors? No, no, it does not. Does it maybe help us begin starting the conversation with a little bit more grace and a little bit more empathy and creating compromises that are better working for us? I certainly hope so. The next piece that I want to talk about is serotonin, which actually takes a drop. Which, if you already deal with something that has effects from serotonin, such as depression, well, you may really want to keep an eye on this. But when serotonin drops, people become a bit more obsessive. This is the obsession piece that we often see and can be difficult to counter. It is why potentially your partner is constantly texting them and thinking about them and talking about them and somewhat distracted. This is not a sign of the devaluing of your current relationship, only that the body now has them obsessing about something. They might also become more obsessed about other things. As an example, if they already play, say, Magic the Gathering, they might suddenly become super intensely interested in that. One of the things that really helps focus on the particular partner is phenethylamine. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce that correctly, but PEA, which is a amphetamine-like trace amine, and amphetamine rhymes with methamphetamine. Essentially, your body is producing its own version of meth light. This is the euphoria that people feel whenever they see or think about or engage with the person that they are in limerence with. It is great feeling. It is very frustrating as another partner, or maybe a partner that is a little bit later in the limerence phases, to deal with this very high presenting person. As a side note, is sex addiction real? There is really great evidence and strong narrative that I think is very valid that much of our discussions about sex addiction comes from the 1980s and a little bit before, and very tightly conservative controlled communities trying to incorporate shame and guilt, as well as to make some money off of classes and therapies based around sexual addiction. Also, having spent a lot of time in sex addiction world and having been a licensed chemical dependency counselor, I think that I have seen and have worked with those who have legitimate cases of sexual addiction. I will say that I think sexual addiction is very much misunderstood and very much overdiagnosed, but I do think it is potentially a real thing. I think PEA has a lot to do with it. Oxytocin. This is the bonding thing. When you hug someone for at least 6 seconds or kiss for 6 seconds, as Gottman says, a 6 second hug or kiss is a kiss or hug with potential. I assume, he says anything under that is garbage. I just assume him and Julie are kind of small time making out all the time. Good luck to them. But oxytocin also makes you feel closer and more trusting of your environment. They have done research that shows that if we spritz oxytocin in your nose and send you in to buy things, you are more likely to trust the person who's trying to sell you things and will buy more things. That does not mean that the other person or environment is more trustworthy or that you are closer to it, but it will certainly feel like that and play that part on TV, which might be why your non-limerence partner is going, hey, I don't trust this person. You're like, well, obviously I can trust them. I'm very close to them. I trust them imminently. Maybe it could be worth your while to go, I'm chemically altered right now. Maybe I should take a little bit closer and listen to people who have established a pattern of commitment and trust and has shown me that they care about me. Last piece on this is testosterone starts getting expressed more in both men and women. And testosterone makes people a bit more risky, less risk adverse, more risk indulging. And if you combine that with the idea that I am a little bit more obsessed, I get chemically rewarded for dealing with or engaging with this person, I trust this person.